You know, and certainly, you know, as libertarians, I mean, what we are concerned about is this collusion between big business and big government, right? Because that's where everybody loses.
Yeah.
But you know, what are your thoughts on the fact that you know, it is now somehow seen as the role of the federal government to disperse, you know, millions upon millions of dollars in terms of quote unquote aid, you know, for people who have been impacted by this. They've appointed this guy Kenneth Feinberg to oversee this huge distribution fund, and ostensibly somebody who couldn't, you know, run their fishing charter, or somebody who runs a hotel that didn't have a lot of occupancy because there were, you know, tourists didn't come because of this, are now somehow eligible to get this aid. I mean, certainly there's a big issue around, you know, the president basically strong-armed BP in terms of having to fund this escrow account to disperse these funds. And then a secondary question, is that really the role of government, to say, to collect tax dollars from all 50 states to disperse here in Florida, and then when there's a hurricane in another part of another state, tax dollars from Florida have been collected to distribute there?
I don't really know. When it comes down to it, they're just not going to do a good job of it. That's the thing. I mean, a lot of times people like to take government, because when people run for office, they have all these high and mighty promises, and so they like to take government and all this should and stuff. But at the end of the day, what person can decide that? It's going to be messed up. I mean, even FEMA after Katrina, my parents, they live in that area in Alabama, and at the end of the day, the people that are wiped out typically don't get the money. The people that are fine and know how to work paperwork are the people that get the money, because they have all these forms, because they create this red tape, and they feel, well, if someone manages through the red tape, then that means they're the right person, and this is how we get the money to the people that need it. Not really. It's people who are good at bureaucracy and red tape that get the money. So at the end of the day, somebody that's good at standing in lines and filling out forms is going to get a whole bunch of money, and usually that isn't the person that has the fishing fleet or is a hard worker and has a business. Usually it's somebody that probably isn't producing, because otherwise, if they're a producer, they don't have time to fill out all the papers and stand in the lines.
Yes. And you know, one final note on this that I need to add, even though it's not necessarily part of our overhead on this one, it has been very interesting to see the media coverage of this disaster as it's rolled out. In terms of, there were nights where, kind of in the background, I would have one of the major network news programs on the 6:30 national news. There were times where this story took up almost half of the allotted 30 minutes of this thing, and certainly a big environmental agenda around this and why it was such a disaster and things along these lines, followed up by articles being amazed that the tourist season was down, that people weren't visiting these areas, you know. So, I mean, here you have the national news broadcasting what a disaster and a calamity this whole thing is, and then expressing interest about the fact that nobody's actually visiting these areas. And it just occurred to me that there hasn't necessarily been a lot of balanced reporting on this. I mean, there clearly has been, I think, an environmental agenda that's been in a lot of the news coverage around this.
Well, and the problem is they don't look at the whole picture. I want a clean environment too, but at the end of the day, I think that a lot of the environmental agenda has been a part of the cause for the situation, because, and a lot of the big government agenda, we've been working on these same cars for years. The government is always in the face of these companies. They regulate them to death, and then they bail them out, and basically the normal economic cycle doesn't work. We probably should be running on cars that run on sunshine or water, but the way the government is in people's business, why would you even bother using your time and effort to design something like that? Yeah. All your money is made on lobbying and doing what the government says. I mean, you wouldn't make money if you created a car like that in America today.
Yeah, good point, well put. Well, Phil, one more federal issue for us to talk about before we dive into some local issues, and it's been a big one, the Arizona immigration update, and we have an overhead up around that. You know, the situation is current U.S. law does require immigrants to register and to carry ID documents at all times, and the Arizona Senate Bill 1070 additionally made it a misdemeanor, a state crime, for an immigrant to not have this paperwork, and this is really what caused the whole brouhaha around this. It was signed into law with an active date right around the end of June. Excuse me. Department of Justice injunction was filed against that, sponsored by the Obama administration, and then a federal judge did issue an injunction that removed several of the key provisions around this. So, you know, the big issue that we have here is certainly a lot of frustration in Arizona around a lack of enforcement around immigration laws. I know that there have been some apologists for the current administration that have said, oh, the legal immigration is at the lowest level that it's been in 3 or 4 years there. But unfortunately, people's perception, right or wrong, is that, you know, that it's still a big problem, number one. Second, there have been some high-profile issues there in terms of some crimes that have been committed, suspected to be committed by illegal immigrants, that I think has put this on the radar screen as well. And of course, I think as libertarians, we probably have, you know, kind of mixed feelings about a lot of this. Certainly a libertarian premise is the fact that you know, people should be able to immigrate, that we thrive from immigrants that come here that want to be productive, work hard, and live the American dream. By the same token, unfortunately, we have a welfare state. And you really cannot have a porous border and a welfare state at the same time. That's a recipe for disaster. Look at California and their state budget out there if you need an example of that. What's your take on this situation?
See, you don't solve the problems of big government with more big government, and that's what people are trying to do. You've got the war on drugs, which creates people that come over here to create crimes because it's, you know, something that if you buy cigarettes or beer at the store, you make some profit, but you sell these illicit drugs, there's a lot of profit. So they come and they have these gangs. Also with the welfare, I don't know how many people are coming over here for welfare. I think people see them on welfare and they think they came here on welfare. I think most people that came here to work, but they come in, they get arrested for working, but then, so they don't have money, and they go down to the welfare office, and there's no questions asked, and we literally turn them into welfare cases.
Well, and of course, there's the big issue of this kind of grandfather clause, where if someone has a child here, that child is automatically a citizen, and then ergo, the parents of that child can become citizens as well. I think there's some concern about that in terms of the level of benefits and things that are provided in those situations.
And there is a problem with actual immigration. I know 2 people, my roommate from college, he actually has chosen not to be an American citizen because it's just not worth it to him. He lives and works there. He's a high-level engineer, so it doesn't matter. But also my brother-in-law, he's from Belize. He would look like someone from Mexico, but he actually works at a Bose factory, and it took him years really to go through all the paperwork just to get green card status, and that was years where my aunt and uncle were prominent in their community and got a congressman involved, and the company he worked for, he's a hard worker, they loved him, they didn't want to lose him. They were basically working on it. So it takes years with a large corporation and a congressman to get legally immigrated here. So when people come and they say this is a good thing and we just want people to follow the law, well, it's not really that possible. You don't just walk over and sign a paper and follow the law.
Right. And, you know, one final note on this, Phil, just to get your opinion on this, you know, with both this case, with this injunction by this federal judge that removed some of the more controversial parts of this Arizona immigration bill, combined with the judge's ruling out in California on Prop 8, the gay marriage thing, we certainly have some examples of, you know, pretty activist federal judges stepping in and in one case, you know, overturning a law that was signed by the governor of the state of Arizona, overturning a ballot measure in California that passed, I think, with some 53% of the people. What's your take on the role of the judicial activism? I mean, is that something that's going to continue to polarize people? Do you think it's appropriate?
Well, I mean, we've been having that for years. I mean, unfortunately, the Supreme Court, I mean, Elena Kagan was just put into place, and she is on record against the Second Amendment and kind of the Fourth Amendment. Unfortunately, people didn't ask her those questions. They asked where she went to church and what she does on her vacation, when they should have been saying, how do you feel about the Constitution? It's a mixed bag, because as a libertarian, we lose so many battles. Sometimes I just wish that we had, you know, thousands of Judge Napolitanos out there to take the country back. But at the end of the day, if the people of a state speak, they should really let it go unless they're citing the Constitution to stop it. And overturning the Arizona law, it seems a little hypocritical on the federal government's part, as intrusive as they are, and the fact that it does mirror federal law. I mean, if they don't like it, they should probably repeal some of the federal laws that Arizona is using.
Yeah, well put, well put.